Welcome to Light Sessions with Sloan, the podcast for women who know more is possible and want to bring it into their lives now. Okay, I want to bring in the intention that this experience is, as much as possible, you and I sitting in this beautiful room together, just having a chat, exploring, going deep together, supporting both of us in raising our consciousness and more clarity, and taking a big leap in your next steps and everything that you're working on and here to do. And just bringing love into the forefront of our conversation and connection, and so much gratitude for our friendship. Do you have anything you want to add, Gina?
It's beautiful. I'm just grateful for dropping in and just bringing whatever needs to come forward in just the most authentic way.
So it is.
Mm.
So I'm so excited for this conversation with you. I want to actually start by just saying how much I love you. And something I realized from our hang the other day was you just have such a lightness of spirit. And I really appreciate that about you and all the journey that you've had in life to either maintain that or create it. I'm not sure. Since we're newer friends, but
yeah. The same about you. So thank you.
Yeah, it's such a gift. So I'm super happy to be here and supporting you with this. And I'm curious for you, how would you frame what is going on, what area we could explore that would have the greatest impact in your uplift in your life?
It feels like this is just it's almost like a feeling inside of me that continues to show up in so many different areas of my life. But it's like, what is the part of me that it doesn't fully trust, that feels like I can't quite believe in that, like anything is possible unless I know how. I feel stuck in looking at limitation, and I'll only know if I know how. So what is the part of me that just cannot trust in infinite possibility?
And it's like there's a part of you that knows there's infinite possibility,
Yes.
but knowing it here.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Is my conscious mind is like, but wait, at every point in your life, you've seen magic. You've seen so much. You've always been supported, but there's a deeper part inside of me that's doesn't really fully trust.
Okay. Can we start with an actual place, somewhere in your life where you notice you're not trusting?
Yeah. I mean, I could think of a few, but one to start, I would say, is with work. I know that I'll only experience when I get out into the unknown with my work, but my brain goes to only set a goal based on what you know is possible. If I don't know the how of how I'm going to get there, I don't want to set the goal beyond what I know is possible. So if I'm setting a goal and I'm considering, do I want to launch a program? If I don't know how that program if I don't know exactly who's going to be there and who's in the program, I don't want to do it because I don't know the how. And my brain goes, but how? How could you offer something that you feel so deeply passionate about if you don't know the how of what the outcome is going to be?
And then you don't do it.
And then I haven't for a long time. I feel that I've limited myself quite a bit based on what do I think is realistic.
Okay, where else is it showing up? Just for me to understand the whole picture.
I think right now it's kind of present for me is in the world of dating. I think I'm creating this very, my mind is like, of course you can absolutely have your dream partnership. Of course that's out there if you're aligned with that. But my brain is like, but, you haven't met somebody here, you haven't met somebody here, and What's been really interesting that's been like a very direct mirror, I think maybe some people can relate to this, is like this last year I've like been connecting with somebody who has made it very clear of like, I'm not emotionally available. And I feel myself still kind of keeping my heart open to emotionally unavailable. If I had a really deep sense of trust of like my dream partnership is out there and accessible to me, like it will come down my path, why in the world would I leave my heart open to anything else? It's like, hey, just so you know, I'm completely emotionally unavailable for you. Like my conscious mind is like, that really makes no sense. But I feel that in my body of like, if I really deeply trusted that like emotionally available dream partnership was there, it was easily accessible, it was going to happen, even though I don't know the how, the when, the where. If I had that deep sense of trust, anything that was not incredible would be just, oh, that's a no, and move on.
Yeah. Which of those scenarios for you feels like more of a block or a blind spot, or we're going to use it to explore this idea because they're definitely both related?
Mm.
And I'm wondering which one feels more sticky to you.
Mm. Yeah, they both feel like the same kind of energy of this like this sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, unsure energy. Can we just start with one and see where it goes?
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with the work one.
Okay. Okay, that's perfect. So with this one, what is the fear when you have the idea for the program? If you do the big idea versus what you know is possible and you already know how to do.
What if nobody wants to do it?
And then what? What would happen if nobody wants to do it?
One, I put in a lot of effort, which I think that's happened many times, of like putting in a lot of time, energy, effort into creation that nothing happens with it.
Totally get that. I've had the same thing.
I think what's underneath that too is this deep fear of like, I wasted time. Like I went in a direction and I completely wasted that time.
So when it's happened in the past, did you have that feeling I wasted time?
Yeah.
So do you feel like when it happened in the past, you didn't learn lessons from it?
I did. I don't know if I learned enough that I felt like that was a good use of my time.
And money.
And money
and
and
energy.
everything and energy and just my heart being open to like, so it is kind of interesting because I think that there's two fears in that. I think one is this, am I wasting time? Which that one actually goes super deep for me. That goes to like a childhood fear for me of like, I'm running out of time. So that's kind of interesting. And then I think the other side of that is this like identity piece of, if it doesn't work out, was I just fooling myself? What does that mean about me?
So I totally understand all of the experience that you're sharing because I've definitely have had it. And this last piece of what you're saying is kind of like the ego. You know,
Yes.
what does that look like? What does it mean about me? And we could probably go really deep on that and looking at what the ego is going to make of this thing not working out. The question that I have that was arising while you were sharing this, like many times happening, is there, if you zoom out and look at the highest level that you can get to of this pattern, let's just call it, and I know that's not always, but it's something
Sure.
that's happened a couple times. Is there something about the way you're choosing to do this or the way you're doing it that has been consistent that might actually be part of the issue? I'm curious about is whether you feel every time this new thing has been offered or the offering has been made, like it's your inner guidance, you know this is right for you, or whether it's a head decision, like, okay, this is the next thing to do. Or, there are a million ways we could come up with an idea.
Yeah.
But whether you actually feel, is this like completely inner guidance, in which case then that's kind of one way to look at what's actually going on, a different track, versus if it's maybe the decision is being made mentally, which is what it sounded like when you were talking, but inside which one it was.
It feels like the decision to move forward with it is a knowing that this is the right way. This is the next path. This is like my next edge, but it's going to come with a lot of trust because it's something I've never done. And then it feels like the hesitation is things that are just in the way. I don't know the answer. I don't really know the how. What if I fail? And it feels like the only time that something is really in forward momentum, it's when I've cleared all those things in the way. And the forward momentum happens when I find what's in the way instead of just trying to force busting through it. So then I think I end up, because when I'm not addressing like what's in the way, like then I think that that's where maybe I'm in resistance. But I think for the most part, when I am stuck in this feeling, it feels like it's this inner knowing of where to go next with my work, where would have the more impact, the more connection, the more meaning, the more purpose.
What would that be? What is this?
What does it actually look like?
Uh-huh.
Well, for me this year, so one of the things, for example, was I love the work that I do, and I've really wanted to share that with other dietitians and other people who are coaching people, because it's a different way of working with people on their health. But I have felt this resistance to offering that for probably years because, well, a lot of different reasons of, is it ready? I don't know. Am I ready? Will it deliver? Will I be able to deliver on it? So it's in forward motion now, which has been great. I'm grateful that I got to that. But there was this inner knowing of like, now that I've been teaching this work for so long, my next frontier is to teach the teachers to do things differently. It feels more like deeper impact, and it feels like what I want to share in the world, but it's coming with this next edge of like, well, I've never had to take the work that I do and teach the teachers. Like, will I be able to? How is it going to work out? Who's going to want to learn? Who's like, just so many unknowns.
And so are you pumping the brakes on it? Or what's actually
happening?
Oh,
no. We're in forward motion.
Okay.
But what actually really helped me was, because this is the first year, the group that I brought together, I was like, hey, this is a beta test, So we're going to like work together on like giving myself that grace of like, I might need feedback. I might need some grace as I'm like figuring this out in these unknowns of being able to teach you, to train you. So it's in forward motion, and I've needed their feedback, but I'm grateful that I leaned into that and launched that and offered that. And, this year I feel my programs have always been online, and to be able to offer in-person stuff, I don't know why I just felt like this really difficult leap. And, as I'm offering my first retreat this year, calling you and being like, I don't know. This feels like a big edge for me that feels, for whatever reason, feels really difficult. And I watched myself creating space from it. And you're like, well, have you actually reached out to people to see who wants to come to your retreat? And I'm like, I think I've sent an email. You know what I mean? It's like there's this obvious resistance to something that feels like an inner knowing of like, oh, in-person stuff would be beautiful. There'd be more impact. There'd be more connection. It feels like the next place of where I need to go. And yet I'm watching myself create this, hesitation.
So just for me to understand, because what you're describing, it sounds like there's resistance and you're moving forward anyway. But is there some way that you feel you're not? I mean, the piece of what you and I talked about, the retreat thing, that felt like a little bit of a blind spot, which we all have them. And then you started reaching out to people once we had that conversation.
It feels like I'm not stuck in complete resistance because I am doing it, but it took me years. I actually first wanted to do retreats like 10 years ago. I mean, it took a really, and I will say there's definitely timing to everything, right? Like timing is an important thing versus just doing an idea just because inspiration hits. But I see that I put a cap on like, so for example, with the retreat, when I decided what would feel really good, what would feel really good for a good retreat group number, I set a number that I was pretty sure of how many people I knew were going to be there. I was like, I think that these people will want to be there. That's my goal number.
Okay, so
You know what I
it sounds
mean?
like the thing is more around letting your heart be available to potentially be broken.
Mm, yeah.
And broken in desire, like if you let
Yes.
yourself go all the way in of I want to have 10 people, but I only actually know 5 who I could see coming.
Yes.
And then I want to also bring in there's a little bit of being real about what people you're in touch with and who you want to invite and that. And then I also do know what you're talking about, which is like letting yourself go into the bigger vision
Yes.
and knowing that even if it's on your heart to have 10 and only 5 come to this retreat, that might be opening you up for something bigger and better beyond.
Yeah.
And still like, okay, you can feel disappointment or anger or sorrow or whatever, but then you still are like in it, going for it, all in.
Yeah, and that's the same energy I feel around dating right now. Is
Yes.
there's just like, but if I don't know when, where, and how, I don't want to be like, yes, I'm so open to everything, and then
Yeah. I had a mentor once who said to me years ago, she was like, this relationship that you're envisioning, calling into your life, what it means, Sloan, is that you will have the possibility to really genuinely have your heart broken.
mm-hmm.
And as long as you keep being with men who can't meet you or who aren't available, that's not possible. So in a way, this is like armor.
That's really interesting because also on the flip side of that, I was very caught off guard by this emotionally unavailable dynamic because that's not a pattern for me. My pattern was me always like not entirely available for anybody else. And so I've always tend to be a little bit on like the avoidant, somewhat cut off dynamic. And yeah, it kind of feels like, in my last relationship, asking myself the question of like, why can't I just completely open my heart to somebody who is so good to me, an amazing human being? What is that part of me that isn't 100% open? And, and when we would like really be in a very heart open space, when I would really like get honest with my feelings in that last partnership, I was like, I would have these realizations of like, oh, this is like terrifying to be completely heart open.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I mean, I think I could definitely relate to that. And this like armor, this heart closed, however you describe it. Do you feel like you've always had that, or did something happen where you put it on?
I think that I've always been a very emotionally sensitive person. So like going back to like childhood, I was just like afraid of everything. Really afraid of everything. And like my mom would always laugh because she's like, you were so afraid of everything and you had to know the answer. And so we would like go for a walk outside and I'd be like, Mom, what's under here? And she'd be like, what's under where? And I'm like, what's under here? And she's like, under the sidewalk? And I'm like, and I would start having like a panic attack and almost like crying. I'd be like, Mom, what is under here? And she's like, I don't know, dirt. I don't know. And it was like this like terror of like, I have to know what is under here, and really afraid of this place of the unknown. So my mom was buying me books that was, because we didn't have Google, it was like, tell me why, tell me how, tell me about how the body works. And I'd be like, Mom, like, what's behind my eyeballs? And I like have to know, like, what is behind what I can't see. And so I think that there's always this very sensitive, afraid young part of me. And then something, as you're asking me that question of, was there a time of hardening? I do remember being in my 20s, and my sister was like really my very closest person in the world to me. My deep, very deep loyalty, being younger than her, I really like looked up to her a lot. And we just had a really like heart crushing difficulty in our relationship it was so deep, and it was so hard for me that it felt harder than any breakup I've ever had. And I remember thinking, like, if I can lose my sister, we didn't talk for years until we finally repaired our relationship, but I remember thinking it was like it hurt so deeply that I was like, if I can lose my sister, whatever, I can go through anything. I can lose anybody. And I think that there was kind of like it felt so emotionally weak and so deep and so painful that I think that there was a bit of a closing of like really wanting to regain control over my emotions. I felt so out of control with my emotions and so weak and so sad.
And so vulnerable.
So vulnerable. That I do think from there was kind of like a wanting to regain control over my emotions, that I could see a hardening after that. And I don't think I've ever really, I actually, I can say for sure, I know I have never really fully opened up my heart to such vulnerability. And I know that deep down, that's the edge, right? That's the edge of like, I know that that's what like my heart and my soul is here to experience. And I have not been able to do it.
Will you try something with me? Okay. Close your eyes. And can you feel that little part you're talking about, the one who went through that in her 20s, and how emotional, how vulnerable, how deep that cut you? And maybe you can say something to her. Maybe you could hold yourself like, I'm just hugging my own body right now. I wonder if there's a way you could be tender with her in that deepest pain and vulnerability, because she's still in there, like feeling that a little bit. Can you sense that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what could you say to her that would be tender, or maybe it's like a feeling, or I'm even like touching my face right now. That could be another part of it. What would feel good to just comfort her? Like, I see you in there.
It feels like her body just really needs to be held. It feels so like she just feels so shaky and internally unstable and so scared.
So is it like holding her with a secure kind of hug?
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. See if you can feel it like on both ends. So there's your arms doing the secure hug, and then there's your body feeling the hug. And this is one of my favorite practices to do, the physical part of it. And it could also be the speaking part of it. But I do it often, which is like when I sense there's that little part inside that's experiencing something that's not most of me, it's not most of you now, but you're feeling it, is like, what does she need right now?
Mm.
What was the comfort that she didn't give, or that you weren't able to give her at that time? The out of control emotions.
I can feel like what she needed to feel, like that, like that sense of like security when everything felt so ungrounding. And I'm not sure what she needed to hear because she was just in such a deep place of pain. And like, well, what I want to say is that, I want to tell her that like everything is going to be okay.
Mm. Yeah. And it's okay to feel this way. It's safe to feel this way. It's okay to experience this deep, deep loss, pain. Sounds like surprise, but unexpected.
Yeah. I think she just feels really, really afraid of like, well, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen next?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So give her a big, firm squeeze. And then when you're ready, open our eyes. And can you see how she's still actually running your life? Or
Yeah.
maybe there was some element of you that was doing that before, but then she's kind of in the driver's seat, even though it's probably not something you think about very often.
Yeah. It feels like that. It just feels like this inner shake of like, well, what now? I can't see what's going to happen ahead. And then it feels like the attempt to create that stability is like emotionally cutting off instead of creating the deep sense of trust. It feels like a closing and a hardening
Yeah.
because that feels so terrifying, that
Yes.
vulnerability.
And so I want to share something and see if this lands for you. And maybe you have different words for it. But it's like on some level, the wound of that experience and then what's continued has been you seeking something outside of you to feel safe.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the other part of that, like you completely hit the nail on the head. um yeah, I think it's interesting because so at that during time wanting to feel that sense of grounding and safety, I think for a while it came to me in the form of like, well, does food provide a sense of grounding and safety? And then had to do years of working on that. And now coming into a healthy place of that, but then still sometimes feeling this vulnerability. And what's been interesting is I have realized that my dad has this energy of such protector, everything will be okay. You don't have anything to worry about. And that has been an energy that I've leaned into so much to give me that. And what I've recently been realizing is I think that I have held my ex-boyfriends to that standard of I want them, my last relationship, I want you to provide that same energy that I get. I want you to step in and be that masculine energy. And thinking that, well, this is just what I want. And recently realizing I have just been constantly looking for this external, somebody else be the source of grounding and safety for me.
It's big.
Yeah. And what happens when none of those men are there and I can't, and that vulnerability is back and it's taken away? What happens when my dad can't be there to be that energy for me forever?
Yeah, it's so good to realize. And so
Yeah.
this practice, it's like every time you become aware, well, let me pause actually and ask you, what's making you feel emotional about what you're sharing?
Um, it just feels like a scary truth that I've had to face, that my senses, like what my sources of where I find safety, security, love are going to be gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll be like, I have to face that reality and that truth. And that's hard.
What feels hard about it, facing it?
That my dad will be gone at some point. And in order for me to build that sense of safety, security in myself, I have to face that truth. Where in my head, it's like, my dad is my superhero. He's never gonna, like, nothing will ever happen to him. He'll be here forever, And then being able to bypass that by putting it onto a partner of, now you need to be my protector, my source of safety, my source of everything will be okay, and thinking that that's what I was looking for and wanting. And it almost feels like I'm intentionally, if the universe had my back right now, it would be keeping me from my dream partnership to put the responsibility on me to to fulfill this part.
Or if you have your back right now, you're doing that. Maybe.
Or me.
Yeah.
I guess we could put the responsibility on me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. It's such a powerful realization. And I want to bring something else too, because I can feel the tenderness of thinking of, your dad being gone, and even maybe how you're holding back this partnership that you really want. And you're so close, and actually much closer than you think, to this self-security, because the truth is that you're thinking that you get it from your dad, but he's almost like a training wheels or something, but he's showing you what it feels like. You already know what it feels like in your body, which is like, that's the biggest part of the shift, the growth. So really, it's just realizing that you can give yourself that feeling anytime. It doesn't actually depend on your dad saying things. You're the one who's experiencing it. Does that land with you?
Totally. Absolutely.
So then the little exercise we did of for you, it was the secure hug. Letting yourself physically actually do that, or the talking, if there's something you need to hear, or feeling the feeling you feel, as if, your mind can imagine your dad saying those things to you and feel that security. So actually doing that, you can use in the moment to, when you notice, oh, I'm doing the logical thing that I know how to do instead of the real inspiration. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it feels like all that would take is the commitment to myself to do it. Like it does feel like it feels like this thing that has felt so far away, and like you said, just right on the other side of like becoming my own inner resource to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I want to acknowledge that you had this way since you were young. So it almost feels to me like something you came into life with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you have something that gets even more dramatic for you to face it, if we're talking like a spiritual level, and this thing with your sister.
Yeah.
And so this is a big life thing. And you might have to do some version of those practices, and then what you create 1,000 times.
Right.
To move yourself into this trust that you want.
It does feel like that has been like my soul's journey, is this sense of like, I'm here for me. We're going to be okay. Right after I was born, they thought I had meningitis. And so they took me for my mom, and they had to do all these different tests. And my mom, she could hear me down the hallway just screaming, and she didn't know it was me. And she was just crying and she was telling my dad, I feel so bad for that baby. She didn't know it was me. And after they counted 25 needle pokes in my body, in my head, my hands, and they had to do 2 spinal taps in my spine. So from the very beginning was like this, I'm not okay. I'm not safe. And what's so interesting is like all throughout life, I didn't actually know that happened to me as a baby, but throughout life, whenever I would get like a shot or an IV or a blood draw, anything with a needle, I would like black out and go into this like hyper response. And I could just immediately feel like that trigger of like this fear of, am I okay? And so it has felt like, so far, it has felt like a lifetime of repatterning, am I okay? But then looking to something outside of me to make me know that I'm okay.
I understand that. I think another thing that's coming up that's a possibility, I had anxious attachment. And the way that I started conditioning myself out of doing it was when I'm in connection with someone, if I start noticing that feeling arising, instead of letting myself go into it, which could be like, I want to be closer. I want to spend more time together. I'm like, it's like a pulling on
Yeah.
someone.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of doing that when I notice it, that I purposefully am like, I need space
Mm-hmm.
and making distance. And I wonder if there's a version of that that you could use for yourself when you're starting to want the outside security.
Yeah, I think it's actually, it feels like from a somatic body place instead of a mental place. Instead of like a shutting out mentally, it feels like a body feeling and re-regulating like we did.
Mm,
That's what it feels like.
okay.
It feels like it doesn't need to be a push out. It feels like it needs to be a filling up internally.
Yeah. A healing, a loving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
I love that for you because what you explained with your sister was that out of control, almost like unmoored. There was nobody, that connection, the way you thought it was different or gone or whatever. And so whenever you feel it, that you're like, no, I'm here for me. I'm here for me. And even beyond the talking is like actually loving on you,
Totally.
you know? So what are you taking from this conversation?
To me, it's right on the other edge of it is really being my own inner resource of like, when I feel that energy, when I feel that feeling, the ability that I have to, like you said, I know how to connect to that feeling. I know because my dad showed it to me. And at this point, like it doesn't have to come from him. And in fact, it really doesn't, like the feeling that is inside of me. But I think I need to realize and use the tool that I have, which is like in that any moment of feeling shaky, ungrounded, unsure. It's just a feeling that just needs, that I have the ability to wrap around with love and with that sense of security and stability that I know I already have access to.
Yes. And it's like you said earlier, it's just a matter of slowing down to actually do this. Because it can be so easy to feel like it's fine, or I don't need to focus on that now. I just need to figure out whatever over here. But it's like literally actually loving on yourself
Yeah.
and healing through that. And then on the other side of it is when you don't need people to give you the security is, I know, it's like the chance for so much more actual love to give people.
Right.
And to receive.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful that, you're the person that I've had this conversation with, because I feel like you're so that, like, you're just like 10 steps ahead of me on that. And I'm like, wait, how do I get there?
I love you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we had this conversation today. What's open for you to explore? Like, what's the next edge of this for you going forward? Or where are you going to be looking, growing, practicing?
Yeah, I'm actually going to do 2 things. I already know I'm going to do 2 things. One thing I want to do is I really want to be committed to spending time with myself and with my body to cultivate that feeling and not wait until I'm in a place of like, oh my gosh, I really need it. I feel shaky, but like just being really intentional of like recalibrating my body to that. And I want to give myself the time and space to really explore my desires, whether it's with work or the life I want to create or partnership. And, I think that there's been even hesitation to like really connecting to the feeling. I remember you telling me about the book Calling in the One, and I'm like, I wonder what that is that I actually feel like, yeah, I want my dream partnership, but I actually have a hesitation to like reading it and going all in on that. And I could not figure out what my resistance was to that. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I actually have a little bit of a resistance to really internally feeling and connecting with what I desire. So I want to combine those two things of cultivating that feeling inside of me and letting my body like really take that in and absorb it and recalibrate to it and be intentional with it. And with that, knowing that that's there and available to me, letting myself really feel and explore like what I really desire because I have this. So I want both of those. And I think in the past, I think I felt resistant to actually doing both of those things.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your open heart. I'm so happy to have
I'll
this
let you know how it goes.
Yes. I can't wait to hear. I love you.
I love you too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of Light Sessions. Follow me on Instagram at Heart and Sloan. Click the link in the show notes. Can't wait to connect with you soon.